Good morning. First, a hard news story today. Do you remember back in the late 60s, the Commonwealth Trust debacle, when the group of companies headed by Vancouver lawyer A.G. Duncan Crux were put into bankruptcy to the distress of many hundreds of investors and depositors throughout British Columbia, many of them from the Okanagan. And it was a big story in 1971 when the man behind the corporate empire fled to the Bahamas to escape prosecution. And in due course, he, Crux, was convicted of fraud, false pretenses, and theft, and did 7 years in jail. The companies have since been in the hands of Harold Sigurdsson, the trustee in bankruptcy. Now, an order has been given by Mr. Justice Gibbs of the BC Supreme Court that Sigurdsson has put himself into an intolerable conflict of interest and must be replaced. It turns out that the investments made by Crux years ago were eventually sold for about $18 million in cash, mostly from good land buys made by Crux before the boom years. All the debts of the corporate empire have now been paid, leaving a surplus of $7.75 million. And here's the rub. Not so many years ago, Crux sold the controlling common shares of Commonwealth Investors Syndicate to, that's the parent company of the group, including Commonwealth Trust, etc., to a Vancouver businessman, John Allen Coles, for $60,000. And it's his lawyer, John Laxton, who got the order from Mr. Justice Gibbs for the removal of Sigurdsson. Sigurdsson, it was stated in court, received more than $2 million in fees over the years. Laxton's claim is that Sigurdsson was acting in conflict of interest by not turning the bankrupt company back to its directors when it became solvent after the payment of all debts. And Mr. Justice Gibbs' judgment says, this is quite interesting, quote, "The constant thread that can be traced through Sigurdsson's affidavits," that's to stop the company from being given back, "is his apprehension that Crux would obtain the surplus funds and spirit them out of the country, preventing the other companies for which Sigurdsson is trustee and liquidator from realizing the wind-up value of the preference shares." And Mr. Justice Gibbs says, "No facts are put forward in support of Sigurdsson's suspicions." Gibbs, the judge, found that Sigurdsson, the trustee in bankruptcy, had no mandate to side with either of the contesting groups. That's Coles against Sigurdsson and some of the preferred shareholders. You see, if you wind up the company, the assets of CIS break down to about $10 to $12 per share for each shareholder of all types. If the company goes back solvent with the surplus monies, the preferred shareholders will only get their allowed 5% per interest per year on their investment. But if the company comes back to formal corporate form because it is solvent, the applicant Coles, who paid $60,000 for the common shares, will win control of the $7.75 million. The next step, a new trustee in bankruptcy to be appointed and approved by the court. And I'm sure that all of the former investors in the Commonwealth Investors Syndicate Trust Group will be interested in these court developments. Now, the other day, the BCGEU, using a front organization called Quality Care Control or something, published alarmist ads that Riverview and Woodlands were going to close almost instantly. We dealt with the Riverview aspect. There is a study being done down the road, but no plans to close what's left of Riverview. What about the panic in the minds of people about Woodlands and Glendale, in which there are still 1,000 mentally handicapped people after the closure and dispersion of the people in Tranquille. Here's what John Noble, the Deputy Minister of Human Resources, said to my question. What do you say to people who give the impression that Woodlands is, quote, as in this, and you give the lie to it, on the verge of closing?
Jack, for as long as I can remember, we've been caught in the middle of this argument. We're under the pressure from the advocacy groups to close Woodlands, and we're under pressure not to close Woodlands. That's a typical situation for my ministry to be in. And we have to be as careful and as orderly and considerate as we can possibly be, with our first concern being the needs of the residents in those institutions.
But still with the proviso that as long as Woodlands is needed for people, it'll be there.
As long as that is the appropriate type of care for individuals, and if that's in their best interest, that's correct.
You'll hear more of John Noble in the program. In the studio this morning, I have two prominent NDPers. One is Nelson Riis, the finance critic. No, he's not a justice critic, finance critic for the NDP. And they're going to talk about a tax probe the NDP are conducting across the country. And also with him is the president of the federal NDP, Marion Dewar, a former mayor of Ottawa. She's the woman who wants to legalize prostitution, make it right up front. Also on the program today, we have the most beautiful girl in Canada. And here she is when she was crowned in Ottawa. Her name is Rene Newhouse. And she is from Cranbrook, and there she is, and we're going to have a little chat on the program this morning. And finally in the program, we're going to have people on from an organization called FAMSAFE, which sells child identity kits door to door, $20. We'll see what they have to say for themselves. But first off the top, what's going to happen to Woodlands? John Noble, Deputy Minister of MHR. Who paid for the ads? We did.
Yeah.
What a...
Anyway.
Ronnie? She is on the center.
Jeanette, can we have the coffee over here, please?
Yeah, two would be great.
We're on a very serious cross-country trip. I hate to plug your phony little commissions. I want to do something more finite than that in taxis. Rich, that's what I'm.
Love something black, please.
I mean, the 250,000 capital
Could I have a cup?
minimum tax for the
Black.
wealthy. That's as phony as a $3 bill.
Well,
The what?
Especially when you got minimum tax brought in on one hand. Capital
Oh,
gains,
yeah.
bullshit.
It's not a goddamn. Over the weekend, big ads appeared in the local papers, paid for by the BCGEU, but fronted by a Committee for Quality Care, in which it said very bluntly, why close Woodlands and Riverview? Yesterday we had the Assistant Deputy Minister of Health saying there are no plans to close Riverview. There's a long-term review and re-examination of the state of the place and what might be done down the road. But I was concerned because people with children, mentally handicapped, adults and children in Woodlands would be very much concerned by an apparent statement of fact. Why close Woodlands? Now, for the record, I have here this morning John Noble, Deputy Minister of Human Resources, Dick Butler, who was the Executive Director of the closure of Tranquille, and Jeanne Ratcliffe, the coordinator similarly for the Tranquille closure. Now let me get it quite clear, Mr. Noble. Have you a plan right now to close Woodlands?
No, Jack.
You have a long-range plan, do you not, said he aggressively, to phase it out by 1991.
First point, Jack. 96% of the mentally handicapped in this province are in the community, living in the community right now. We're talking about a very small percentage of the mentally handicapped still in institutions. We've been, ever since we took over the institutions for the mentally handicapped, we have been reducing the numbers in those institutions. Now, Woodlands is quite a different kettle of fish from Tranquille. Tranquille, we were faced with a 74-year-old building, and we were looking at up to $20 million worth of costs just to make it habitable.
Surely the money wasn't the main problem. Surely the problem was to be how to handle the mentally handicapped.
And we still would have had an old building upgraded, you know, And we had been in discussion for years over the issue of a community-based service as opposed to an institutional service, and there was a commitment to that in the throne speech in 1981.
Well, let's leave that for the moment. I don't want you to get away from me. Now, in the closure of Tranquille, you were the executive director of that.
I was responsible. That was my task.
How many patients were taken out of Tranquille and put into the community?
266 for placed
Are
in the
they
community.
properly established now?
Yes, indeed, they surely are.
Have you had any, I'll use the word carefully, disasters about putting severely handicapped people in group homes where they didn't get the proper care?
No, we have not. We had quality care developed.
None. Now, I remember at the time, though, to Jeanne Ratcliffe, there was a great problem about coordination. People complaining their child was in Kamloops or in Poughkeepsie and they were in Kamloops, or they were in Kelowna and the child was in Vancouver. You coordinated that. How did it finish up?
In the majority of the cases, all Tranquille residents were returned to their home community, with very rare exceptions where they were placed outside their community.
But John Noble, in Woodlands right now, and in Glendale, let's not forget Glendale, you've got 654 patients in Woodlands with a staff of 1192. In Glendale, you've got 324, a staff of 429. Now, they are severely, mentally, and physically handicapped.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Do you plan to close Woodlands and Glendale? I'm looking at this ad. What did you think of that ad?
Our first concern, Jack, was that this would be quite a blow to the emotions and the feelings of the parents and the families of the mentally handicapped people.
That's why I jumped on it.
Through their associations, they've been trying for years to overcome the prejudice against mentally handicapped people, and this doesn't help at all.
But these people here said, we, the community, are facing a situation which endangers the care and threatens calamity to our streets and community. There will be an alarming rise in abandoned street people, community hostility, and death by exposure and neglect. Have they any... what's your response to that?
Not a scrap of evidence to support that allegation, Jack. There has been no evidence of any of that in any of the group homes in the community that we've established following the closure of Tranquille.
They're talking about the closure of Woodlands.
Well, the closure of Woodlands, we're talking about a very slow, gradual, orderly process over many years. We're not talking about anything like the closure of Tranquille. And yet, with the closure of Tranquille happening as it did within an 18-month period, we have not had those problems because we went to great lengths to make sure that the support services were built in, not just putting them out on the street, putting them in quality care situations. I resent the allegation there that we're looking for the lowest bidder. We did not look for the lowest bidder, we looked for the best quality bidder. And most of the bidders, in fact, were the local chapters, the local associations of the mentally handicapped.
Now,
And they're running the group homes.
Now, have you already started a process, to any one of you, to similarly remove people in Woodlands and Glendale into the community, cutting down the present numbers?
We have been doing that for many years in Woodlands. When we took it over, there were 1,200 residents there. It's now down to something like 650. Dick, what is happening in terms of further reductions in the numbers at Woodlands?
Woodlands.
Or Jeanne?
Yes, we have one ward in Woodlands that we're planning to place those residents in the community on a gradual, phased-out basis. And
How many people is that?
I think it's
About
approximately
21.
21.
About 21 people out of the 654.
That's correct.
These you've adjudged to be well enough to, if they're cared for properly in the community.
Definitely.
So the only accurate thing about this ad is that 21 are under consideration for removal of the 600 odd in Woodlands. Is that correct?
That's correct.
On the basis, but surely, ladies and gentlemen, there are severely mentally handicapped who cannot now or ever be put in the community.
Well, that's
Or am I an old reactionary?
Well, that's a debatable question, Jack, that's still being debated, and it depends a great deal on the medical assessment of the people. The Ministry of Health, in fact, has announced that it will run an experimental program for a few severely handicapped people in group home situations in the community.
Has that not already been done?
No, it's in process. It will be an experiment, and it will be running for a year or more in order to find out whether it's feasible or not. And these will be people who normally would be considered what we call extended care eligible, which is the highest level of handicap that there is. The most handicapped
most
people.
severe.
The most severely handicapped. And the Ministry of Health will be running that experiment with a few severely handicapped people.
Now, okay, let's get back to the basic question, though. Would it be correct for me to speculate and say, yes, Woodlands will be closed when and if all of the mentally handicapped patients in there have been assessed at the proper level and a proper place found for them?
Eventually, that could happen. It may well be that the smaller institutions may be necessary for some severely handicapped people. We don't know that yet. This is an area where we're experimenting. We're trying to break new ground, and it's not yet determined
Are
whether
those in
they can be
Glendale
held
less
in
severely handicapped than those in Woodlands?
No, in fact, a number of people who could not be moved from Tranquille into the community because they were more severely handicapped and we could not meet the licensing requirements by placing them in the community were in fact moved to Glendale, where they are now. The important point being, of course, that Glendale is the newest of the facilities. It was opened in 1978, I believe.
So the situation right now is Tranquille is open.
Closed.
Tranquille is closed. Woodlands is open and will remain open.
For a long time.
For how long a time?
We don't know.
I remember 1991. What's that in my mind?
Well, if you consider that it took us 10 years to go from 1,200 down to 650, and we started off by moving out those most able to move out. So as we make the changes, the people that are more and more handicapped, the ones that are left behind, it could take us quite a long time to complete that.
Well, a couple of things I want assurances on. On your Tranquille transfers to the community, what's your biggest group home? Is it half a dozen? Or?
Six is the largest home we have, with the average being 4.
And do these people run them on their own? They hire their own staff and run their own place?
We either contract with a nonprofit society or a proprietor, and they run the home and they hire the staff and supervise the day-to-day care.
Have you had to cancel any of the group homes you set up from Tranquille?
Not as yet. I think it has to be stressed again. There was quality care with support services built in and day programming. It's not just residential. They have a residential program and then they go to day programs.
I mean, I'm one of the old school, as Mr. Noble will shake his head about and say, surely some people are so severely handicapped that only people who deal with them on an 8-hour shift can cope with it. Am I not right?
Many of these homes are on a shift staff model, so there is 24-hour staffing, and it's all tailored to the specific needs of the individuals.
All right, John Noble, I know you're a civil servant, but I'm going to ask you, what do you say to people who give the impression that Woodlands is, quote, as in this, and you give the lie to it, on the verge of closing?
Jack, for as long as I can remember, we've been caught in the middle of this argument. We're under the pressure from the advocacy groups to close Woodlands, and we're under pressure not to close Woodlands. That's a typical situation for my ministry to be in, and we have to be as careful and as orderly and considerate as we can possibly be, with our first concern being the needs of the residents in those institutions.
But still with the proviso that as long as Woodlands is needed for people, it'll be there.
As long as that is the appropriate type of care for individuals, and if that's in their best interest, that's correct.
So this ad gives a totally false impression.
If we can find something better for them, Jack, then we will replace Woodlands with something else.
When?
I can't tell you that.
Many years down the road.
Many years down the road.
But the Tranquille project was highly successful. It just was beyond our dreams. The way people changed, having been placed in the community, the contacts with the relatives where that didn't happen before, was extraordinary. Just marvelous.
You've seen some miracle recoveries.
Yeah, we've seen some incredible
And changes.
It's
Even in
fantastic.
the first few months, the changes in the self-care skills, the sense of pride, independence, excitement, choices.
The contact with the families.
Oh, yeah, it's just really the contact with families.
Tremendous.
But some of the families must have been so far away they didn't really contact.
In some cases, families hadn't had contact for several years or limited contact and now visit 3-4 times a week. They go on holidays together, they spend weekends together.
So the old policy was wrong, really. The permanent policy of somebody being mentally handicapped being locked away.
We find that they're operating at a higher level in the community.
Without any danger to the community.
After being removed from these. We're talking about severely handicapped people. Anyone who is any likelihood at all of being a danger to the community has been out of an institution for many years, Jack. We're talking about the remainder, the people, the 4% or so of the mentally handicapped in this province who still need to be in an institution.
I'll chew on that one. I'm thankful for your presence here this morning, Jeanne Ratcliffe, Dick Butler, and Deputy Minister of Human Resources, John Noble.
Thank you,
After
Chair.
the break.
Thank you.
Except for the part of those duties that were performed in that particular place, as the case may be, and was allowed no deductions in computing his income for the taxation year, except such deductions as may be reasonably be regarded as wholly applicable to that part of the business or to those duties.
Regret to inform the member his time has expired. The honourable member for Levy.
I do get kind of time. And there he was on the bumper shot, Nelson Riis, finance critic of the NDP, reading unmitigated gobbledygook from the Income Tax Act, and the Speaker had the gall to shut him up.
Terrible.
Did you make your point?
I think I made my point, Jack.
Make it again.
Well, the point is, when you take this document, a few thousand pages of the Income Tax Act of Canada, no one can understand it. It is incomprehensible. If any accountant, any tax specialist in the country says that he or she is on top of this tax act, they are misleading.
They wouldn't call them liars, they're just confused.
Well, perhaps they...
Nelson Riis, you're chairman of this kind of propaganda tax probe that the NDP's got on the go at the moment.
No.
That's what it is, because really, if you were in power, you would really hammer us with taxes in clear, simple language.
I don't think anybody could hammer anybody more than people are being hammered now with taxes. I think people are mad as hell now. I think they're saying we've had it, we're not going to tolerate this slapping on more gas tax, this increasing the sales tax, taxing budgie food and pop and candies and so on, increasing personal tax. People just aren't taking it anymore. We've reached the limit.
Okay, hold it. I want to adjourn for a second to introduce your distinguished guest, whose views I abhor. Marion Dewar, former mayor of Ottawa. Right. The prosperous town in this country, where everyone is working and doing very well on their civil service pay, aren't they, Marion?
I wish they were, but many people are.
What is the view you have, which I find really quite awful?
What view is so awful?
Tell me. We were talking about it before. I want you to tell me.
Prostitution?
Yeah.
I just think that prostitution should be decriminalized. I think prostitutes should be licensed. I think that it's a business, and I think that these women should be treated like business women, and I think that public health should be protected by making sure that they all have health records and health inspections, health certificates, and it just makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's about time we stopped hiding behind a whole lot of double standards and deciding that if we lock a whole group of people... So
Marion Dewar tells me, shades of Sven Robinson, that you want to open whorehouses in Canada.
I can open whorehouses, or you can have a district that is licensed, but you make sure that people that are working in the prostitution field are healthy, and that they certainly have the protection of the laws of civil rights like anybody else, and not be part of the underground and the organized crime.
In other words, they wouldn't have pimps if there were whorehouses.
That's right.
That's what you think.
That's right. And I would really charge the pimps, which are not being charged now, Jack.
I see. So therefore, you are against Bill C-49, which, to the great relief of Vancouver, has cleared a lot of the adult prostitutes off the street. That's a dangerous anti-democratic move, is it?
I think that what it's done is it's enabled young women to have criminal records, and their chances of rehabilitation and the ability for them to move into a system that is not quite as difficult as the one they are in is becoming next to impossible.
Two suggestions. One, why don't we start, if you win the battle, and have courses in our universities and colleges on how to be a good hooker? Hey, how about that? If you're going to make it legal, let's make it really legal.
No, if you want to make it legal, what you do is protect the people that are there, and then you start to put in some kind of economic protection for women in this country so that they start to get equal pay of equal value, and then there isn't the need for many women to survive on the streets because they have no alternative. And don't you start laying on your moral righteousness on them, because maybe someday you would have been in that same boat.
Let me put another question to you. What do we do with a 14-year-old prostitute with AIDS? How do we handle them when our Young Offenders Act, and especially the facilities of the government of British Columbia, are non-existent?
Well, the Public Health Act should look after that and make sure that they get health protection, and it's absolutely outrageous if the British Columbia government is not looking after that in their health care.
Neither the feds nor the provinces are looking after the underage prostitutes.
No, of course, because people like yourself have always decided that these girls should be locked up instead of being looked at as young offenders that really probably haven't had the kind of resources that maybe your children have had.
I'm concerned more about the failure of the Young Offenders Act, and even the new one does nothing because the provincial government doesn't have the resources. But I'm grateful for your views. At least you don't hide like some NDPs behind equivocation. Mr. Riis, tax probe. What about the Mulroney's record on tax advantages for the rich?
Well, I think a lot of people are perplexed these days, Jack, because you've got Mr. Mulroney on one hand saying, listen, we're going to bring in a minimum tax to tax those folks that are making $600,000 a year and paying no tax. But at the same time, we're going to give everybody a capital gains break so that they can earn $500,000 in capital gains and pay no tax. In other words, he is just making more of a mishmash of the whole thing. I think tax advisors across the country today are pulling out their hair with what's left of it. Saying, I mean, how the hell can we advise anybody under tax when we don't know what, in other words, we have no implication, no idea how these things are going to be used.
So the one campaign promise that Mulroney is keeping is to make the tax laws better for the rich and tougher for the poor.
I don't know
Am
if
I correct?
Well, if he campaigned on that, yes, he's certainly following through, increasing the limits on RRSP so that those people now in the $86,000 a year bracket can set aside some money for their retirement. I'm not certain that we should be using taxpayers' money to assist those people and making the 86 grand to assist them for their retirement.
Where and when do you hold your hearings on your tax probe in
Jack,
Vancouver, for instance?
Well, the Friday morning we're holding them down the Vancouver Hotel. By and large, though, rather than hold public hearings and I guess be accused of what you said earlier about some kind of charade here, we're not doing that. By and large, in most cities, we're visiting tax experts, the tax specialists, tax lawyers and accountants, the forest industry, to find out how taxation affects them and so on. In other words, we're going to people who work with the tax system, who know it, to ask them how to make it simpler, how to make, in other words, more understandable, how to make it more effective. In other words, we're spending a lot of money now on taxes we don't collect. What are we getting for it? No one's ever asked the question, Jack.
Can you answer me a question? How much money do the federal and provincial governments collect on these apparently exorbitant taxes on gasoline prices?
I can't tell you the exact amount of money.
Is there any hope that the Tories, if the oil companies reduce their price because of the collapse of world prices, any hope the Tories will reduce the federal taxes on gasoline?
Well, no, I don't think so.
Would you?
Yes. Because the federal tax on gasoline, Jack, is discriminatory against Western Canadians. It's
Good
a tax
point.
on distance, eh?
Let's leave it there and take it up again with Marion and you, and we'll go for phone calls too. You say the gas tax is discriminatory because of distance. After the break. Marion Dewar, Nelson Riis.
Good morning. Let me tell you about a couple of the things that we're working on for today's noon news hour. There's a price war raging on diapers right now. For a couple of reasons, stores are climbing over each other to give you the cheapest diapers they can. We'll have a consumer report on that. And believe it or not, your pet cat or dog may be neurotic and may be able to be cured by a sort of therapy. How do you tell if your pet needs analysis? That's today on the noon news hour. Join us.
Well, that's not protecting Canadian sovereignty. That's just too much.
CBC's always been like that, but the Journal's not. You were 7 years the mayor of Ottawa.
Yes.
I hate people that call you Dewar, don't you?
Oh.
Dewar.
Dewar is right.
Now, what are your views on this tax probe, Marion?
Well, I think that for a long time, Canadians have been told they can't afford any of their social programs, and I think we heard Pat Carney saying this just recently in the House. And what we have to look at, what are our tax expenditures? And we're looking at more than $50 billion a year, Jack, that is not collected from corporations, from loopholes that Canadians have been given. And that is greater than our annual deficit that everybody is talking about.
But let me give you the classic free enterprise answer. If it were correct, you took another $50 billion out, you would dispirit enterprise.
Well, that's what we're asking, Jack. We
we
want to
wanna
find
know.
out that if you're going to get $1 million or $2 million to help do some business, or capital gains to encourage you to invest, does that in fact encourage you?
Well,
I mean, do
these...
you invest because you get a capital gains holiday, or do you invest because you can make a good business deal?
You invest because you make a good business deal.
Because if you don't do that, you should be doing that.
You won't last.
If you're investing because of a tax shelter or a tax dodge of one kind or another, I doubt if you're going to be successful. And that's what we've got too much in this country. We've got business not doing business, but doing tax.
One thing that worries me, and it seems like such a rip-off, but you know, you'd have to have an Auditor General investigate it for you, scientific tax credits. We had a shipyard in Vancouver recently which got big scientific tax credits, and it's closed down. Do you know anything about these scientific tax credits? And I'm suspicious of them.
It's been a real scam. It originally was introduced by Mark Lalonde in '83, and he said it was going to cost the taxpayers about $100 million. That's what they anticipated. The last estimate now is at $3.5 billion. Probably will come in closer to $7 billion in lost taxes. Some individuals, Jack, that we're finding out in our tax probe, actually received a check, certified check, for $16 million, cash.
To do what they like with, more or less.
That's
well,
right.
They said you're supposed to do some research. What? I mean, you guys got $60 million. He flees and he's down in the Bahamas now, or God knows where they are.
Oh, we've got calls here. I hope they're on taxes and not on your favourite topic. Go ahead, please.
Taxes are my
Nelson
favorite.
Riis, please.
Yes, it is.
This morning, Pat Carney made a statement that that she could not legislate the gas prices down because of the government involvement in Petro-Canada and would go against the Combines Act. But what I thought was, well, why doesn't Petro-Canada, as an individual gas company, lower their prices? How long do you think the other gas companies would take before they would follow suit? It would be immediate, wouldn't it?
Well, that's precisely the point. If we're going to have a crown corporation, we want to get something. After all, Petro-Canada. And so we've been advocating, Pat Carney, to say to the crown corporation of Petro-Canada, lead the way. Reduce the prices at the pump, and the others will follow you. She has that right, and quite frankly, I believe she has that responsibility.
Hasn't she leaned on them by telex or something?
I don't think if she does any leaning, it's the other way. And so, look, if you're going to do anything, don't lead the way. We don't want a crown corporation leading the way.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Just in connection with what Mr. Riis has been saying, what I want to point out is that I've been living in British Columbia now since 1969, and I left Manitoba at that time. Right then, the NDP came into government, and one of the major issues was that the NDP were going to be bringing in all kinds of programs for the people, and there was these little voices in the background saying, "Where was the money going to come from? Where was the money going to come from?" And it seemed to be very easily ignored. Subsequently, Manitoba, of course, now has the highest provincial tax rate of any province in Canada, which only goes to show that it's fine for these people to go ahead and complain about the tax system and the ways of raising revenues and decreasing taxes, but there's no thought given to it.
In other words, you're saying the NDP had tax disasters in power.
Jack.
Is that what he's saying? Yeah?
Well, he's absolutely wrong. He's absolutely and totally wrong in his facts. When you add up all of the costs, taxes and other costs like healthcare premiums in the province of Manitoba, it ranks third in Canada from the bottom. In other words, they've got one of the lowest comprehensive total tax rates in the country. And I want to add, if I have an opportunity, the lowest unemployment rates in the country as well. So in terms of the total tax, the total cost to the taxpayer, Manitoba ranks third from the bottom in Canada.
Oh, it's the wrong one. Go ahead, please.
First, I think that there's a tendency to talk about the taxes, but we as a people have taken all these giveaways for years, and I think you've got to look at the total package. But my question really concerns the concept that somebody that has a large involvement in a corporation and is collecting dividends on which the taxes have been paid is not a taxpayer and has not paid taxes. Yeah. He's paid taxes in the same sense that an employee works for a company and has money contributed to the government by the corporation, and he's credited with those taxes.
Okay.
The shareholder has the same situation.
Okay, but do you object to that free enterprise interpretation?
He's absolutely correct that, in a sense, it's double taxation. This is one of the serious aspects of the tax system we're looking at now, and how to relieve that.
Thank you.
He's right on.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, in regards to the $500,000 capital gains tax, I'm just curious, since this has become effective, now when another government comes into power and it gets phased out, like I can't take advantage of it right now, but in a few years I may be able to. So what's the situation going to be? Is it still going to be in place, or is it going to be phased out? Like if another...
Depends on the political complexion of the government
Well, it
in power.
depends what the government's going to do, but I think you also have to recognize that it's about 0.1% of the Canadian population that ever claims capital gains. And to suggest that that's a way to start the engine going in the economy is nonsense. I think what we have to look at is that maybe some of these policies are good, but if you look at Nelson's Income Tax Act, that he has with him here, you'll recognize that policies have put in to try to drive the economy or have social programs. Income tax should be revenue collection only, and then put these other programs in another.
Thank you. More after the break. Wouldn't a flat tax be favorable? Has that ever been in the NDP realm of consideration?
Well, maybe not an exact flat tax, but
I mean, that would nail the Dodgers. That would really nail the big boys.
If you talked about a flat tax, maybe 4 or 5 levels of flat tax after, yeah, perhaps it would be something to look at. Yeah.
Because there are people who are willing to gamble on MUBs and tax shelters and whatnot who pay nothing, but they take terrible gambles and they're broke next year.
They're losing in BC and they're gambling on those.
Many of our Peter Newman's favourite millionaires ain't so prosperous
No.
No names, no backdrop, Webster. Go ahead, please.
Yes. My question has to do with the current gas prices. Just recently, my wife and I moved from Ontario out to Vancouver here, and we were coming through the Okanagan.
Distance.
And the gas prices there, it seemed like every station was having their own little gas war, which was about anywhere from 35 cents to 48 cents. Now, when we got to Vancouver here, we're paying 56 cents. I just can't understand why, you can do that.
Nelson?
The last day I was driving to work on Parliament Hill, I looked at the gas stations. They were 52.2 in Ottawa. That's another 2,000 miles from the oil field. So there's obviously something. It's a reflection of provincial and federal sales tax and a little bit of increased pricing by the oil companies as well. So between those three, I think we're just about priced ourselves now to the maximum.
If you're close to the border, the prices are in the southern interior, prices range from 46 to 50 cents.
Yeah.
Because of the competition across the border. You know this business, we can save $13 a tank full by crossing the border.
And they're still making money. But again, I think that the culprit has to be seen as a tax, as both federal and provincial.
Why is it discriminatory against us because of distance?
Well, when you're paying a lot for gasoline, your truckers, and we truck everything, food, refrigerators, shirts, and everything else, because we've got to truck it over a longer distance in Western Canada or Northern Canada. Aviation fuel is also involved in this. Well, it costs us now in Western Canada more for everything because of the increased transportation costs as a result of increased gas prices.
You wouldn't suggest equalization of gas prices across the country, would you?
Perhaps we should be looking at that. Isn't it one of our best resources?
We're told it is.
Well, and I think Canadians should benefit from that. I think it's about time we started looking at each other as Canadians and not as regional.
Well, I'll tell you, Marion.
Let's start provincially, Jack. We do it with liquor now, right? A bottle of liquor is the same price everywhere. Why not the same for gasoline? Why should Northerners and interior people be discriminated against?
Because of the incredible economic disparity between the West and Central Canada, we feel more alienated than we ever did during the PQ crisis. Maybe an exaggeration, maybe not.
I don't know. And it's getting worse by the day as far as I can. And this discriminatory gas tax doesn't help.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. My question is it's not basically a question, it's a question and a comment. The prostitution situation here in Vancouver, there's one simple thing you got to realize, that half these prostitutes are collecting welfare. They're subsidizing their income.
Correct.
Okay, now if we do as Marion suggests, turn it into a business, aren't we collecting tax revenue from that?
Yes.
Well, she sees nothing wrong with that.
It's so simple.
Definitely okay by your standards.
Certainly.
Well, they get them off the street, Jack. Then you can keep the little 14 and 15-year-old kids off the street. Keep Bill C-49 in place. Keep people from buying it on the street and put it in a house. Put it in a den of iniquity if you want.
Well, I must admit it would bring a lot of American tourists up. They don't have whorehouses in Seattle. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. Dealing with income tax, just a few weeks ago,
there was a family that lost their home, car, everything because they're small business people that got into some sort of difficulties with the income tax department. Now, I remember 2 or 3 or perhaps 4 years ago, Nelson Scalbania apparently was $4.5 million in back taxes that he did not pay, and he's still flying around high, wide, and handsome, making the quick buck. No.
Okay, let me explain that to you. He collected his creditors together after a couple of incidents and whatnot involving his corporate empire, and he made a deal with his creditors, including Revenue Canada. And as I recall, his allowable income, which he was allowed to make before he started paying off his debts, was $90,000 a year, with the approval of Revenue Canada, who obviously thought he was quite a good bet in that if he made money back again, he could pay his taxes. What he's done since then, I don't know. I think that's accurate, isn't it?
Yes.
I hate discussing individuals' tax things, and
you've got to be careful on that.
Pretty clear. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen, and madam, and Mr. Webster. I would like to say one thing on legalized prostitution. I think it's a good idea in that on a health standpoint, you would have the prostitutes inspected.
Daily or hourly?
Pardon me?
Daily or hourly?
Well, I wouldn't say daily, but I would think weekly, as
Not
they
good
would
enough.
be licensed on that, and age requirements. You have to be over 19, and you would reduce the where they could be. And I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
We've missed the point of this discussion, Jack. We should be sitting here asking ourselves why these kids and why these women are on the streets, period.
Because of failure of equality of opportunity in the capitalist boomer bust system.
Well, let's identify that and understand that. That's the critical
casualties. But when I hear some of my NDP friends saying that they can wipe out prostitution at the grassroots in the present system, they are whistling Dixie.
Of course they can, but they can. I mean, we could be doing a lot to eradicate a good deal of it because of desperation.
That's right.
But the trouble is that's a long way down the road.
Well, we don't seem to even starting down that road.
Well, the NDP in British Columbia doesn't do much about it. I'll tell you, neither does social credit. And certainly the Tories won't bother about it. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Mr. Riis.
Yes.
That incomprehensible income tax act, is there any hope that they're going to do anything with it? Because I've got a legal and accounting background, and I've thrown up my hands completely.
Yeah.
It's absolutely impossible to work with. It's all I can say to any of my clients is get the hell out of the country with your money. Forget it. You cannot operate here under the present legislation.
Well, it's a sad comment when people have to say that, and I understand why. You as a practitioner find it incomprehensible. Indeed it is. And you ask whether the government will move on it. One of the reasons that Marion and I and others are touring the country, raising this issue, is to put the whole matter on the political agenda of the country. And we're optimistic that if we get enough people talking about it, enough people demanding it, in fact the government will move and will give a reference to the Finance Committee to spend the next 18 months and find ways to simplify the tax system and make it more effective.
I enjoyed meeting you this morning. When I heard it was a former mayor of Ottawa, I knew it couldn't be Charlotte Whitten. And when you came in, I knew you couldn't be as old as Charlotte Whitten would have been. Marion Dewar, President of the NDP, really, apart from her views on prostitution, a very nice person. And Nelson Riis, the finance critic. So you don't want people to come and see you, you're going to see them.
Well, we'll do a little bit of both, Jack, but primarily we're going to be going out and talking to people in their homes and their offices and their shops.
You'll be in the Hotel Vancouver, that's your headquarters.
Well, Hotel Vancouver the rest of the day and holding open hearings tomorrow morning.
Where? In the Hotel Vancouver?
In one of the salons.
And anybody that wants to write us, please get in touch with Nelson's office.
Okay, Marion. Why don't you have guts enough to run?
I will. I had a job during the last federal election.
You were the mayor of Ottawa?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. You could pay a social call on Harcourt because, you know, we might have a mayoralty vacancy one of these days if an election is called. And I'll be back after the break.
Rene Newhouse, Miss Canada 1986. Rene Newhouse, Miss Interior, British Columbia.
You've got to be bright to pick up complicated subjects. Have you got unpadded shoulders?
Yes, I do.
We have it at least one viewer glued to the television set in Cranbrook this morning, and that's Mrs. Betty Ann Newhouse. Who is Betty Ann Newhouse?
It's my mother.
And who are you?
I'm Rene Newhouse, Miss Canada 1986.
When were you crowned?
October 28th in Toronto.
In Toronto?
Yes.
By the way, are you wearing padded shoulders?
Yes, I am.
Show me. Do you like the padded shoulders?
I sure do.
But I'm told that one of your favorite hobbies is weightlifting.
Weight training.
Weight training. Oh, I
Just
thought
toning.
it was the weight training
No.
that had given you the massively square shoulders.
No, Jack.
How many contests have you been in?
I've been in 4 pageants, and I started when I was 17 years old.
Which 4?
I entered the Miss Cranbrook pageant, which is called Sweetheart of Sam Steele, and then a few months later I participated in the Miss Peony pageant. That was in 1983. And then last summer, in August, I participated in Miss Interior, was crowned Miss Interior, and went on to Miss Canada.
Now, Miss Canada, that was the toughest competition in the country. How many girls were in on that one?
Over 40 girls were participants in the pageant.
What did you
itself.
have to display, apart from your good looks, to the Miss Canada?
Well, we had
contest?
interviews with the judges, talent judging, the talent segment, and we also had swimsuit, evening gowns, and of course the impromptu question.
Okay, what, the impromptu question. Who gave the impromptu question?
Mr. Jimmy Pattison for my question.
Oh, he was the judge?
He was one of the judges, yes.
And he asked you how much money you had in the bank?
No.
He did.
No.
What's your particular talent?
I did an interpretive dance. 2 Tears Are Not Enough. I danced ballet and jazz.
Interpretive, but we can't do that here unless you get up on the table.
No.
And that wouldn't quite work. Now, in school,
Yes.
how old are you now?
I'm 19.
19.
Yes.
How heavy are you?
Oh, do I really have to say?
Yes. Answer the question, witness. What is your weight in pounds? Because give me in kilograms.
Between 115 and 120.
How tall are you?
5'6½".
Is your weight just perfect?
I'm not sure.
Oh, yes, it is. 115, 125 feet, 6.5. That's just about right. Now, was the Miss Canada pageant worth anything in terms of loot?
Oh, yes. All the girls received gifts, as you have our program, and all the candidates received prizes, and then I also received more prizes after I was crowned.
You got a Pontiac Grand AM.
That's right.
Valued $13,042.34. What were you driving before you got the Pontiac Grand?
My mom's car.
Your mum's car?
Yeah.
Well, and did you get any money? Oh, yes, you got money.
Yes.
How much? How much was it? How much?
It says right there.
Well, I tell people, you'd rather I didn't tell people.
Oh, I rather you didn't probably, but
Okay.
it doesn't matter. It's up to
No.
you.
And jewelry, and Coca-Cola, and luggage, and gosh,
Yeah.
must have been worth, what, $100,000, $20,000?
Yes.
About $20,000. Now, what are your career goals?
I haven't really decided really what I want to pursue my career in. I have a few ideas. One is working with children. I was a playground supervisor for a few years, and I really enjoyed working with children. Also, being a flight attendant and modeling, perhaps just as a hobby, part-time.
So that's modeling, flight attendant, actress, it says here, too.
That's hobby, yes.
So what are you going to do now? You're now going to open a P&E?
Tomorrow evening, I will be at the Peony Grounds with the home show, yes. And I will be touring the Peony Grounds also.
So that's the P&E Home Show 86 as it helps celebrate Vancouver's 100th birthday.
Right.
Oh, that's great. How'd you like it? You didn't bring your crown this morning.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would have if I knew that you wanted to see it.
Anything you want to say to Cranbrook?
Just hi, everyone from Cranbrook and also the interior of BC.
Well, thank you very much for coming this morning.
It was-
This is the delightful Miss Rene Newhouse. Which school did you go to? Rene Newhouse?
Rene Newhouse. I went to Mount Baker Senior Secondary School in Cranbrook.
We left a couple of years ago.
I graduated in '84.
In 84. Miss Canada 1986, and you can see it at the P&E Home Show tomorrow night.
That's right.
My thanks to you and the very best
Thank
of
you
luck.
very much.
And I like your padded shoulders.
Thank you.
And I'll be back with a story about FAMSAFE after the break. Unless I knew about them in advance. tax code, 86, background check.
I like your tie.
Everybody wears.
Lovely.
Okay, Ronnie? One and two free-for-alls. My hair's fine. Well,
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, Ronnie?
Hello, everyone in TV land.
30 seconds.
look at that glass first.
Yeah.
Go back in the front. The other day I was doing an interview with Judy Cullen of the non-profit organization Child Find. And the topic came up of an organization called FAMSAFE, of which I had not previously heard. And it was said that this is a door-to-door selling kit for identifying children. Now that makes me a little identifying children in case of eventual and potential disaster. That makes me a little querulous or critical in advance about it. And I have here this morning Judy Ryon.
Right.
You are the founder of this organization called?
FAMSAFE.
When did you found it?
In September of =85.
What does it do?
What we do is we provide a child identification program to properly identify children in the event that they are ever lost. We provide the complete kit that the parent can do at home on their own. We provide fingerprinting ink with instructions on how to get good prints. And if a child does go missing, what we do is we publish and help distribute 1,000 missing person posters on that child.
And how do you make these sales?
Well, so far it's been through a door-to-door campaign. I screen my people. I have them go down to the police station and go through a criminal records check. And they also wear identification, photo identification.
So and you've got the proper municipal licenses
yes,
or permits to do this kind of thing.
Yes.
I don't like the door-to-door bit.
It's one method, Jack.
How much do you charge?
$18.50 per child. It's a one-time investment. It's not a yearly sort of thing. And that gets everything that I've...
So you finish up with a kit, a FAMSAFE kit, in which the parent puts in the details.
That's right.
The parent puts in the recent passport photo.
That's
the
right.
parent does the fingerprint.
That's right.
Now that's dicey.
Well, there's no...
I'll tell you why, when an ident, 100 fingerprints before he knows how to do one.
It's not something that's probably as easy as it looks. A lot of the programs, as in the London Drugs program that was operating in the malls, used volunteers. All of the programs, unfortunately, have to use volunteers because they don't have enough police to go around.
As a matter of fact, London Drugs have done, with the block parents, have done the identification of 60,000 children at no cost to the parents. Isn't that right?
Well, that's true, but you've got to look at the cost that's involved in, first of all, going to the shopping center, standing in line, impulse purchases, maybe a treat for the child. I mean, any parent who's done that program can account for themselves what, in fact, the free program costs them.
Well, you're saying that yours is just straight $18.95 at the door, whereas they might spend $20 to go to London Drugs.
Well, it's a matter of convenience, Jack. We're just an alternative to provide the same type of identification for the child. The issue isn't whether, how it's provided to the child. It's a matter of having a child properly identified.
Well, there may be an issue in how it's provided. Apart from the identification, you take a hair sample and you give them fingerprinting in which they have to roll the fingers.
That's true.
As instructed in the book, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where do the fingerprints go?
They go on the front.
On the front cover?
Yes.
How many people have you sold this $20, let's call it $20, $20 kit to?
About 500 so far.
500,
yes.
10,000 gross. You get a good response?
Yes, we have.
But these fingerprints would not be good enough, would they, Mr. Frandsen, to be used by CPIC or
yes,
by
they
the
would.
police?
On the contrary, the fingerprints would be good enough to be used by the police. And,
you mean it would go into the CPIC system?
According to the identification squad of the Vancouver Police, yes, they would.
They're good enough to go?
Yes.
How many complaints have you had?
None.
None?
None at all.
What kind of sales force have you got?
Currently, I've got about 6 or 7 people out there.
6 or 7 people?
Yeah.
So, but you agree, too, that the London Drugs deal is quite a good thing for free?
Well, they're all good. Any identification program for a child is good to have on hand. You need to have that information available, you know, before the child.
But all I need to do is get a pad of ink and do my own fingerprints for the kids, isn't it? And take a picture and have it.
But parents don't do that.
Oh, well, I can't blame you for trying, my dear.
Jack, it's a matter of public awareness. You know, the more people that hear about it, the better off we are. I think it's a complementary program to any other program that goes along. And I should say, I have nothing whatsoever to do with FAMSAFE. Judy came to me at one time for a critique on the program. I'm not involved in any way.
Oh, no, I'm glad you told me that, because I thought you were in some way a direct associate.
Not at all.
Judy Ryon. Well, Judy, thank you very much for explaining your situation. And people, if they come to the door and they're properly identified, they'll have a better idea of what they're selling. It's going to cost them just under $20 if they want to do it. No high-pressure stuff at all.
Not at all, not at all.
Good, thank you very much. I'll be back with the free-for-all after the break. We've got time for a couple of segments of free-for-alls this morning. This Commonwealth Investor Syndicate is a very complicated matter, but I tried to explain it off the top. I don't know that I could handle all the questions on it if there are many, but I know the basic situation. And of course, it will come as a surprise to a number of people that there are surplus assets, because you lose track of these things over the years, you know, after the unfortunate founder went to jail for 7 years. He's long since served his time and a free man and has, you know, paid his debt to society. But it's an interesting situation when a businessman buys the common shares and wants the company out of bankruptcy to handle a $7.25 million surplus now in Commonwealth Investors Syndicate. There was a pyramid of companies. Now, where am I going? Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. I'd like to state an opinion and answer to one of your earlier questions.
Yes, please.
I'd like to say that we should legalize prostitution. We're creating criminals with the young girls, and our attitude towards that whole area is appalling. I think yours is mostly appalling. You have a very, very bad attitude about it.
I'm antiquated.
Yeah, well, the lady that was on from the NDP, you were just telling her that the whores and prostitutes...
I know more about the practical effects of prostitution than either Mrs. Dewar or you.
You asked her what you do with a 14-year-old prostitute with AIDS.
That's right. We've no system to deal with them in our society.
You do the same thing as you do with the Jack Webster with AIDS.
Thank you very much, sir. It's very kind of you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to one of those homes in Glendale.
Yeah.
And,
You mean one of those patients in Glendale?
well, you know, one of those group homes?
No, Glendale is an institution.
Well, yeah, in Victoria, you know, when they were phasing them out.
Right.
My girlfriend took me through one, and they've got pool tables and shuffleboards, and they've got everything. And, you know, they've got the mentality of an under 5-year-old. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, if anybody
can put all that money like that.
I'm certainly not going to not give them facilities that can be used by somebody. You can't be that cold-blooded, my dear. No. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Yes.
Jack, I just returned from California and Arizona. I was down there for about 2 months. And all that time I saw one Expo commercial. Since I've been back, I don't want to exaggerate, but I see at least 10 a day here, and it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And the other thing I'd just like to mention is down in Arizona and California, I was paying 90 cents for a package of cigarettes, 90 cents for a bottle of beer, and 90 cents for a gallon of gas. And, hello?
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm jealously listening.
And, you know, I came back and I was pretty depressed for about a week, and all I'm trying to do now is get back down there.
Thanks very much. That's a good Canadian attitude. Thank you. Go ahead from Kamloops.
Kamloops, yes, Jack. Facts. Fathers and Children, their society from Kamloops.
The which?
Across Canada, organizations have formed seeking joint custody and the end of the Paternity Act because it's a sexist, discriminatory act. When can we appear on your program, and when can we be heard? We are an organization that started a year ago, and I noticed that you've got FAMSAFE on there, and they started in September, and we'd love to come on to the program. And
You are people that say that the kind of the system which gives children to the custody of the mothers is sexist and discriminatory.
that's a reality, Jack.
You are a bunch of fathers of broken marriages who can't get access to your kids.
No, Jack, we're fathers who have custody of our children, fathers who have visitation rights to our children, and fathers who don't have visitation to their children. We are also extended family members who have been cut off, grandmothers and grandfathers who cannot see their grandchildren because of the divorce system as it stands now.
Would you suggest that we're a mother in custody of a child and doesn't want the paternal grandparents to see the grandparents should be forced to allow access?
I'm saying to you, Jack, that as it stands now, if a child dies, a non-custodial parent or grandparent does not even have to be notified.
That's terrible. I agree with you on that one.
We'd
That's
love
appalling.
to come on and talk about our situation, Jack.
All right, well, you write me a letter which is legible that I can read, and Steve Wyatt will phone you and give you a yes or a no as soon as he gets the letter, won't you, Steve? Thanks very much. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment. You had a program a couple of days ago regarding the subject of zombies.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just like to say that zombieism is practiced widely in British Columbia. Just look at the situation with Bill Bennett and Stephen Rogers. And if you've ever been into an unemployment office, I could sure tell you that the place is filled with zombies.
Behind the counter or in front of the counter?
Behind the counter. Oh, if you've seen the look on their faces, you'd be sure that they've been dead for weeks. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Oh, what do you say to that? That's a joke, I say. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yes. On the Canada AM program this morning, they had a segment on the news regarding the Expo overrun in expenses, and also that some of the pavilions may not be ready on time.
On the report, the lost report, which was found and published in that tabloid that we have here.
Yeah, I guess picked up from the garbage or something, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. So I said. So I haven't seen the report myself yet. I presume it's a real report, but I have no individual knowledge of its veracity.
Oh, okay.
But you found it interesting. That'd be on the wire service, that story. The wire service scalps everything it sees and starts it on its way around.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. Interesting little book. If MD has found another copy, please deliver it to my office. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning, ma'am.
I have to say I've listened to you for many years and I've enjoyed it. However, this morning I would like to discuss the $6 billion that you spend here on health care, and which is 70% of your tax dollar, I'm told by Jim Nielsen. Also, why then are you sending patients out of the province, say to Edmonton, for lung transplants and this sort of thing?
Because we do not have the facilities or the organ transplant backup to do it in this province, and the Medicare pays the full cost of the operation in Edmonton.
I see.
But that's merely, we have a pretty good Medicare system, and just because you're here for the winter to get away from the foul climate of Edmonton, don't knock it. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. That's about it. But I have to say...
I suppose you're another poverty-stricken farmer.
No, I am not. I have worked all my life, Jack, and I have worked, and now I have enough to keep me, and I'm enjoying some of your lovely weather. I also spend a great deal of the summer in the Okanagan, and I love your province.
Oh, good.
But I can't understand where the money goes. I guess I'm pretty dumb.
Yeah, I guess you are.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead from Fanman.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'm calling to state my absolutely horror at the government of Canada wanting to legalize prostitution.
Oh, that's that Marion Dewar of the NDP, and she and Sven Robinson. The NDP, of course, have always in recent years wanted to legalize prostitution. They never think of the consequences or anything else.
Well, I don't think these young ladies of the night need to pay taxes. I don't believe that's the solution to the problem.
Of course it isn't.
I believe that Canada has to upgrade their social services. I worked for Human Resources for 3 years, and I was appalled at the amount of people who slipped through the system because of burnt-out social workers. I believe that our tax dollars have to go to help these people that really are amiss with their life and don't know which direction to turn except the street.
And you know as well as I do that half the hookers in town draw social welfare all their lives.
Of course they do.
And they're also tied up with pimps, many of them, and they're also in many ways zombies. That's what they are. And they're poor, unfortunate creatures, and to legalize the prostitution and glamorize it in any way would be a step backwards beyond belief.
Oh, I think that if Canada was about to do that, I think that we should just write ourselves off from the rest of the world and isolate ourselves. I think it's absolutely unbearable. I'm a Canadian. As a Canadian, am absolutely appalled. And I would like to also comment that I and my husband are also looking into work visas in the States. I can't believe what's happening in this country.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Jack. Bye-bye.
More free-for-all after the break. Only the shadow knows what's in the phone calls. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yep.
Yes, I'm calling about the methadone clinic.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why you didn't have any patients on with Dr. Graham and Schroll.
I had half a dozen or more patients on. Let me say one thing quite clearly. Were you in that group?
No, I was not.
The group I interviewed were very nice people, apparently clean and well controlled.
Yes.
But apparently, you've always got to say that when you're talking with the greatest of affection about addicts.
I know.
The reason, you know as well as I do, the reason the government clamped down was because of gross abuse of the system by at least one private doctor, one of whom billed, according to what Dr. Graham told me, $104,000 in 1 year, in 1 month, and also the system of giving out the prescription allows methadone to be made up, for instance, in a gallon jug.
Oh, I know.
Half of which can...
on the program.
You knew I would have that on the program because they raised it. I didn't raise it.
I know that.
And you know as well as I do that for what is it, $100 for 100 milligrams, there's a hell of a lot of money to be made in peddling methadone.
Yes, you're giving the whole side from the junkies off the street. You're not giving from the people that are trying to straighten themselves out.
Yes, I am. Let me finish. What I'm saying is that I do not blame the government for temporarily and apparently very on a slow pace tightening up the system. They said quite clearly that not everyone, as of the due date, June the 1st, is going to have to go and take a daily shot of methadone. Those with the clean backgrounds and the clean records will go 2 or 3 times and maybe once a week. And in far distant parts of the province, there will be doctors who can prescribe methadone. But I don't blame the guy. And you know, when you see somebody on for 16 years, you begin to wonder.
Yes.
Don't you?
Well, some people can't do without it.
I can't do without cigarettes, it would seem, but at least it's legal.
It's legal. That's not our fault. This is illegal.
But we're not going to make methadone legal.
Make it legal.
Any more than we're going to make heroin legal.
It is legal.
Heroin is not legal, used criminally in drug addiction.
No, but it is legal, and it's about time.
No, the testing of diacetylmorphine a la heroin is being tried in various areas in the country. Many doctors don't want to bring it back into the system. I have every sympathy with methadone addicts. God, some of my best friends for years were the biggest junkies in town. I watched them do their hold-ups and get their teeth bashed in before they went to Britain to get on the prescriptions from Lady Franco on Harley Street.
I know.
And I told the Brits at the time, this is the start of a massive invasion and you're going to have the problem. And they said, what do you know about it? I said, I'm with the vanguard of junkies coming from Vancouver to London to rip you off. And I'll tell you another story. No, not fair. But I'm not unsympathetic. You know that, you creature.
I know that. But I'm just saying now, Dr. Graham and Stoltz, they made it like there's 60 clinics. There's 3 clinics in Vancouver, and there's going to be 800 patients going there.
Not all at once.
All at once.
No, not all at once. There's not going to be an arbitrary start on June the 1st.
You know what we should do?
No.
We should just make an appointment to get together 1 year from today to see what they've done.
Well, I hope I'm still...
I hope you're still here, too.
If I'm spared. Okay, love, bye-bye.
All right.
That was off on a sidetrack, wasn't it? Yes, yes. Hello.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Phoning about the remark that person made about the people behind the unemployment insurance counters being zombies.
I knew that.
They are trained to be zombies. They're not allowed to have any compassion or feeling for the people on the other side, because if they do, they are becoming involved, and that's not allowed. They have to count as all the people that they see, and there is a quota that they must meet every day.
And I have every sympathy with them, because there are so many tragedy stories that the girls or men behind the counter could be in tears all day.
Yes, they could be, and they're not unfeeling people. They're working and doing a job which they feel is a service to the client, and hopefully they are doing a good job.
Ma'am, I do. Actually, let me apologize if we've hurt anybody's feelings. My sense of humor is a little bit twisted and sardonic at times, but the one job I wouldn't like is to be a UIC claims check who has to deal with people who have been disqualified, or their cards are missing, or mistakes are made, and they've got no money, and they don't want to go to welfare, and it's going to be another 4 weeks before they get the check, and when they get the check, it's not the full amount they thought they were going to get. It's a heartbreak for the applicants in trouble, and it's a heartbreak for the people who serve them. And thank you very much for calling. You got me off the hook, love.
Thank you.
Thank you. Duncan. Oh, good old Duncan.
Yes.
What's the name of that place I go? The Village Green.
Yes?
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I just took a little bit of resentment in that comment you just made about a poverty-stricken farmer coming out here.
Well, I thought it was a wealthy farmer. It didn't say poverty-stricken. I said wealthy, didn't it?
No, you said poverty-stricken farmer.
I meant wealthy.
Well, okay, anyways.
It was just a wee joke.
Farmers, we were farmers ourselves in Saskatchewan.
Why did you come to BC?
Because we went bankrupt.
Oh, I asked around.
You worked hard. Hard-working people, and I just took resentment in the comment you had
Okay,
made.
that's my second apology this morning. It was a poor attempt and a feeble attempt at humor, and I promise never to do it again.
Because the farmers are hard-working people. They produce a lot of food for the country. If it wasn't for the farmers, it wasn't for the retired farmers coming out onto the island into Vancouver, there would be a lot less money floating around.
You're one of our principal industries.
That's right.
Where are you from? Saskatoon?
We're 70 miles west of Saskatoon. We're around Rosetown.
Did you really go bankrupt?
We went bankrupt, yeah.
You walked away with nothing?
We walked away with nothing. We sold all our household furniture and we moved. We left. We just...
You don't sound that old. You only sound about 50.
About 50?
Yeah.
No, I'm not 50.
What are you?
What am I? In my 30s.
You're a daughter of a... I thought you were maybe 80 or something.
No.
Sorry, love. My apologies. Please forgive me. I won't do it again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I knew she was 30, but I thought she must be the wife of an old farmer. What am I doing now? I'll be back after break.
Expo 86. 91 days to go.
Be loud. Tomorrow we're doing a special serious forum on the right to die with dignity. But now, where are you children from?
Stony Creek.
Say after me, 9 a.m. precisely.
9 a.m. precisely.
Say it again.
9 a.m. precisely.
Expo 86. 91 days to go.
On tomorrow lunchtime. Eh? Yeah, tomorrow sometime if possible. I'm going by plane to Salt Spring in the afternoon. We could probably make it at lunchtime. How about, have to be about one. A forum of experts on the right to die with dignity at 9 a.m. precisely. Tomorrow I'm doing a very serious forum on the right to die with dignity, and we have a number of experts who are going to answer my questions at 9 a.m. precisely. Have you ever wondered if you have a right to die with dignity? We're going to deal with that on a serious forum tomorrow with a number of experts at 9 a.m. precisely.